ocean freight a reliable alternative to air for flowers from Africa? Is ocean freight a reliable alternative for flowers from Kenya? Feel free. I'd like to roll the dice to anyone here if you want to chip in. All right.
If I can kick off that one, I would say that if all boxes are ticked, sea freighted flowers will be as good as air freighted flowers, if all the boxes are ticked.
May we know the boxes, please?
Hey, temperature, packaging, excellent production, excellent handling before and excellent handling after. That's 5 ifs. 5 big ifs.
So we're talking about 5 ifs. All right.
Yeah, but then you have to compare it with if there are all the problems are solved for air freight. So
Hey.
biofuel, no CO2 output, etc., etc.
Exactly.
I mentioned as good as.
You take an ideal picture of air freight versus an ideal picture of sea freight.
We will get there.
All the window.
We will get there. So there are boxes to be ticked. And there are quite a number of, okay, not exponential figures, but few flower boxes are moving by sea currently. Christo,
Yeah, I think.
which boxes are you ticking?
Okay. I thought you mentioned the actual box, the reefer box.
I'm one of them.
You're one of them. We have done about 300. So, and I'm not going to say all 300 were perfect or ideal, like Harry says. But out of the 300, at least 90% was, let's say, a tick in a box and good to go and sellable material. And that's too low because in air freight your waste percentage is around 1%. So we need to get there, and it's gaining a percentage here and a percentage there. I think most importantly it's the cool chain. Okay. I think we have identified, especially from farm to consolidation center. We as Kuehne+Nagel are strong in consolidating. Let's say smaller batches. So if you have 1, 2, 5 pallets, you can bring it to us and we fill up a container. So from farm to consolidation center, there's a lot of degree hours lost. I think if you do the maths, you have done it, Jeroen, for yourself. But if you are really capable of improving that, you gain at least an extra 4 days of vast life. And you can do that in several ways. So you could think about the trucking and improving that. You could look at pre-cooling in a better way at the farm. We always advise growers to cool down the bunches just before packing, just before dispatching, instead of 12 hours before packing into a box, where the heat is not easily as removed as a solitary bunch in a bucket. So there's several ways. One other way we as Kuehne+Nagel like to invest in is that we are going to build local consolidation centers, so be closer to the growers, and in that way shortening the distance between farm and console center, and not losing as many degree hours as we do right now.
Interesting.
By that box that has to be ticked or.
I would like to pose a question then to Elizabeth. Quality compliance. What role will it play now to ensure from 300 boxes, let's say Kuehne have done year to date, to 600 in 2024?
I think I want to echo what my fellow panelists have said. For sea freight to be successful, we need to work on the supply chain. And I must say that if you had asked that question 5 years ago, I would be very skeptical, yes. And I would say yes and no. But today I can say confidently yes, because what needs to be done is not rocket science. It's the simple things in the supply chain. You need to invest in training, you need to invest in controls, you need to invest in systems. And of course, on the infrastructural side, you need to have good cooling facilities. But yes, it is doable. And I think from the farm level, You need to have very strict protocols all the way from harvesting, what time you harvest, how much time it takes for you to deliver the products to the cold room, how you control the pests and diseases or how you monitor the same, how you cool the flowers, how you pack, and how you dispatch. So yes, it is doable, and it has been said earlier today that COVID made us realize the strength that we have, and we realized all of a sudden that sea freight is very doable. Yeah.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Maybe
I'd like to add
Oh,
something to that when we talk about the supply chain at the beginning stage. We always talk about the first mile and the last mile on containers. It's important because once it's in the container, the temperature is maintained and you can pretty much, the seals on, nobody's touched it. And we find in the whole region, and I said 26 years I've been doing this, and once we can iron out the challenges in the first mile and the last mile, we find that the quality is vastly improved. And a lot of it comes down to the education level. So a lot of people don't understand the product as well as what they maybe think they do, or they should understand it. So any perishable product, whether it's flowers or anything else, once you've cooled it, you do not want to increase its temperature. The moment you increase its temperature, you're losing at least 3 days of shelf life every time you increase the temperature. So you take flowers, and we saw those grass, those lovely grass you presented. The farm cools it down. Then it goes into a cold truck with no refrigeration, or has got refrigeration, but the temperature is rising to 12 degrees, 14 degrees. You've lost 3 days. You're going to recool it again at the consolidator, at the DC, then sitting on the tarmac for 4 hours. You've lost another 3 days. And then on the other side, in Europe, you maybe lose another 3 days. So you don't really see that when you go to air freight, but when you go to ocean freight, that becomes a problem because you've got 700 hours that you have to worry about. So it's very crucial that the cold chain is maintained completely and packed inside the containers as fast as possible. So if you look at active CA containers that we present as the best solution, you don't always, it is the only solution, but it's the best solution. You're not only reducing the risk of botrytis, your flower quality is better, your greening is better on your green product. But the idea is to get it into that container as fast as possible and change that atmosphere to protect the flower for the longest voyage. And you want to make sure that once it's cooled from the farm, it is at that temperature throughout that chain for at least 1 degree. You don't want more than 1 degree. To maintain that through Kuehne+Nagel's facility or anybody else's facility, and then packed it from a cold store straight into the container. Now you've already increased your chance of success by probably 80% of what's going to happen at the end voyage, because what you do in the beginning is compounded 3 times at the end, which you don't see. But after a long voyage of 25 days, then you warm the product up and put it on the shelves. Now there's a huge reaction, because once the latent heat of the ripening process starts, it soon compounds the life cycle of the plant. So the first mile is so crucial. And, Kenya gets quite hot here in summer, I'm sure. I've been here 3 or 4 times now. And it gets pretty warm in summer. I'm quite shocked it's so cold at the moment. At 20 degrees, you're taking your lifespan of your plant and you're reducing it 9 times. That's how fast your plant is ripening, but the flowers budding. You're reducing the lifespan 9 times during that period. So say you've got 2 hours at 20 degrees on the tarmac. You've taken 18 hours off your product life, and then times it by 3 at the end of the voyage on the shelf. So if you're at 30 degrees, you're now multiplying that by 45 times. So for every hour you're at 30 degrees on the tarmac waiting for a plane, 45 hours you've lost of your product, and then times it by 3 at the end. So this is a compounded process, and although you don't see it in air freight, in containers that becomes crucial, because it can be double folded by the time you get to the end of your life cycle of your product.
Thank you, John, because that's a very interesting point. And I'd like to ask Mercy, how could you differentiate between the post-harvest flower which goes by air and the flowers that goes by sea?
Okay, before I answer that question, I would like to answer the question you asked before on whether sea freight is doable, yes or no. So my answer would be yes, sea freight is doable, Of course, we have done it. So yes, sea freight is doable. We have proven that it can be done. However, it requires the input of everyone from the chain, from the beginning all the way to the end. So I would like to just highlight on some of the experiences I have had when it comes to sea freight. So it starts with the right product, so you need to know your product. It starts even way far with the breeders, getting us the right cultivar on product that can be able to travel by sea. It also comes into, making sure that your start crop quality is good. So when you talk about the production people, the technical people, to take good care of the crop to make sure that it is healthy and strong. And then it comes into the process, how you process your product. Do you have the right infrastructure in place to be able to keep the flowers cold, to transport to the consolidation center, for example? And then it also goes into the shipping partners, making sure that the product is getting loaded on the vessel on time, always on schedule, and making sure that the transit times are not fluctuating, too much. So that is the answer I would give with regards to whether sea freight is doable. Yes, of course it is. There are some challenges which we still need to address. And sea freight is still developing in Kenya. We are not even where we need to be at this stage. Some products travel way better than others. So like I said, you need to know and understand your product and do a lot of research to be able to know what is possible and what's not possible. Yeah, with regards to the question you asked about how do you tell a flower that has gone by sea or air, like I said, some varieties or cultivars perform better than others, but if you took a bunch of roses to someone who didn't know anything about flowers to give you what's the difference between a sea freight and an air freight, you often would not be able to tell. And if they are really keen, sometimes even the quality could be better. So it depends on what kind of product you are looking at, is what I would say.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Christo, maybe I should ask you, 300 containers done. What was the shelf life, the vase life, after the container was delivered, let's say in Rotterdam by sea? How many days could you?
We have not monitored all of them. I think Jeroen in his vase life room has had quite a few out of those containers. So maybe that's a better question for Jeroen to answer.
Jeroen?
We can see that many of the retailers in Europe give a 7-day vase life guarantee. So 3 days in the shop, 7 days at home. And if I have seen that I'm happy, all boxes ticked, then we qualify. 95% of those bunches achieves it. However, there is others where you can see the packaging was terrible, the temperatures were terrible, and then we are only at 70-80%, which is a definite no-go. So if you do things right, we'll achieve the supermarket guarantees, including the shelf life. But I think that is where how do I put it? If we tick all the boxes, well, I think at this current stage we can't have sort of half of the shipments not being good enough. Yep. It needs to be more consistent, and I think that is where we are. We have, as an industry, we have a fantastic opportunity, and I think just the idea for investors in this country that you have 2 modes of logistics available, and not only depending on one mode, but with packaging issues, with temperature issues, with poor facilities on the European side. This development, it's not a done deal yet. There's a lot of risk, and we better start sorting it out.
Great. Before we jump, you want to add up?
Yeah, I think we've talked about quality, which is paramount. That is the most important thing. We need to get that right. But on top of that, I'd also like to think about the supply chain itself, about the planning, about departure dates, about reliability in schedules. That's where we also need to make a step.
Yeah.
Now we have 2 departures in a week. We as Kuehne+Nagel, we are more or less independent, so we can choose between CMA, Maersk, MSC comes into play. So you will have multiple departure dates. But also looking at total transit times, there's also a lot of variations, which was, let's say, could be explained from the completely disrupted supply chain worldwide.
Yeah.
So until the beginning of this year, let's say the first 5-6 months, it was really terrible. But that's getting better and better every week. So. That's really positive. So you hear more and more from, let's say, especially the industry players in the Netherlands. Sea Freight, I can work, but the planning side is a bit hard. 1 week I have 2 containers, the other week I have nothing. But that has to improve, and it will improve.
Now then, John, how do you assure us reliability, fast transit time?
Not per se fast,
Yeah.
Reliable is more important than fast.
Schedule integrity.
So schedule integrity is very important, and I think it's probably I could go into a 3-hour discussion explaining you graphs and percentages and performances and how things were so challenging with vessels and charter rates and all that. But that's a whole nother discussion on itself. But I think what's happening now is that you've seen that the global economy is actually downscaling quite quickly. Things are turning very quickly to normal, specifically on the dry cargo side, which then helps us on perishable cargo. It was a very unique situation that we're sitting in, that perishable cargo has always paid more than dry cargo, and we were sitting in a situation where dry cargo pays more than perishable. So where in the past it was always dry cargo get kicked off the vessel and perishables gets the priority because it's urgent, suddenly dry cargo is paying double the price of perishables, and that changes a whole lot of things in the supply chain dynamic, which is incredibly difficult to manage, including empty resupplies. But that is all now calmed down to a large degree, and vessel availability is becoming key and becoming easier to get hold of. So we've bolstered our JetX product now to 5 vessels, which we were just waiting for ships during this COVID period to get hold of. So as we said, Friday, 3 o'clock was a cutoff we discussed for vessels sailing every Saturday. And that's very positive because it's reliability. You can't have a fortnightly service when you've got to sell flowers every week.
That's it.
I remember once being in the UK, and I have a thing with my wife that I give her a red rose whenever she gets off a plane, no matter where she is in the world. If I'm there first on business and she gets off for holiday, she gets a red rose. And I was so disappointed once in the UK. I couldn't find a red rose anywhere. So, regular supply and demand, it's important. The little things that we get used to. So that I think will answer your question.
Curious to know there where you looked for a red rose, not finding
in London Central.
In London?
Area,
oh, wow.
It was very weird. They just didn't have. I think it's for the reliability is important. I think that's what we focus on first: reliability of supply of equipment and reliability of vessels. One of the crucial things that came out of the whole COVID pandemic is that people had to do a lot of things outside the box, which cost them a lot of money. And as we move into this new period of the new normal, which is probably somewhere not quite COVID level, but we're still sitting somewhere in between prior COVID and now, is that it's very important that us as suppliers and everybody in the supply chain, we are able to deliver to customers the product when they need it and the amount they need it. So if they forecasted 5 boxes for this week, then we delivered 5. If they forecast 6 containers next week, we delivered 6. And the same goes for the packaging guys, and the same goes as the air freight capacity and everything. If we can do that, already we're making the industry sustainable, and that people are getting the best product at the best time on the shelves. So if we can work together, and very much as a very quick trip to Kenya, but I'll be back in a few months' time. I'm very uncomfortable in this. I'm normally on jeans and on the farm talking to growers. So this is different for me. But, the whole thing is working together. It's about collaboration. But collaboration is such a loosely termed word. People sit behind their desk and say it's collaboration. That's not collaboration. Collaboration is when the people making decisions like you and me are sitting at the farm, listening to the farmer, listening to Kuehne+Nagel, their challenges, and then working together with visibility and accountability, because we have to be accountable. So there's always going to be risk in what we're doing, especially when you're selling a new product. But the visibility has to be there so that guys like Jeroen he can take the information and show us these lovely graphs and say, listen, it looks flat or it doesn't look, where do we fix it? And you only get that with accountability and visibility, and definitely technology. When we talk about technology earlier, technology in reefers is a far cry from what it used to be when we didn't even have reefer units on the container. It just used to be a portal with plugins. You might remember some of those days. That's showing our age. But now we've got the advanced technology. You can monitor your own box. You can check what's happening with the container. The box is easily downloaded, a push or a button. Guys like me, I have access to those systems as well. At any one time, a client I can speak to in a meeting, I can log in and we can have a discussion. And I think that's the visibility that's required to make the big step forward in the change in the quality, to go from your 90% to 100%. Okay, let's say 99.9, because there's always going to be challenges, I think, air freight or ocean freight. But we want to get down so that there's the least amount of wastage and the best amount of outturn and the best profitability. And I'm not going to say the best profitability for me, the shipping line, or the best profitability for Kuehne+Nagel or the air freight guys. We really want the farmer to be profitable. Because if the farmer is profitable, he will reinvest, he will grow more, becomes more sustainable, we'll do more volume, and everything becomes sustainable. So we cannot, kill the golden cow, so to speak. We have to look after the farmer, and to do that, we have to make sure we're honest and accountable in the chain, that we deliver the best product in the market that he wants to go to in the right amount of time and on time for his delivery. We can't be a week late for Valentine's Day. I mean, that's just not on. So I hope that answers your question.
It does, and it brings me to another point. Visibility, accountability. Jeroen, do you see a need of more data exchange among, let's say, the panelists to bring us to a position where we could tick more boxes?
Well, I think it's not just about data, because data can always be, we can agree 5, and if it's 6 we are happy. Well, I think it's not about data. We need to have clear key performance indicator. When are we happy with delivery temperatures? When are we happy with packaging? What is the right temperature for stuffing? I think there's different parties where you can choose to have your flowers consolidated and loaded into a container. What counts for me is to be loaded at 0.5, 1.5 degrees. That's key, that's what's important. That's what we can measure, and that's what should be in a service level agreement. But then about packaging, if that box doesn't allow air circulation, you're composting, then we don't want to have you in a container. I think that is where our industry should quickly embrace standards. And if you're not within those standards, then I'm not sure where to send those flowers, but we can't have them in Europe. And I think that is data exchange is key, but data against proper standards. And I think that is where our industry needs to agree. When are we good enough, temperature-wise, packaging-wise? We need to have those data on varieties. We have flower varieties, we're pushing them to the limit, and they're ethylene sensitive. There's 3 breeders, all varieties checked, no ethylene sensitivity. There's 3 other breeders, and one of them says, ethylene sensitivity. That is stuff that we need to understand, and that's stuff that we need to reach agreements, that we can't launch ethylene sensitive roses in the market anymore. They're not sea freight ready. And I think that's the type of approach that we need to work on this together and make it work. So data, yes, exchange it as much as we can, but based on proper standards that we can measure, that are worthwhile, that are achievable.
Great. Cost-wise, very sensitive discussion and topic. If we compare between air and sea, what's the difference, Elizabeth? Are we talking a big difference here, or are we talking very minute that as a shipper you'd feel, you know what, why wait 28 days? I can go for 72 hours.
I think we need to look at it broadly and not only focus on one particular aspect of cost, just like saying I'm paying $2 or $3. We need to look at the benefits of sea freight besides the actual cost. Of course, it's cheaper to ship by sea, but of course, there is also the aspect of time that you spend transporting the flowers. But the bigger picture is the sustainability of the supply chain. And like the panelists are saying, we need reliability. Once we address the reliability, then sea freight is going to be as good as air freight. And I want to talk about the quality of the products that we send to the market and all the benchmarks that we put for sea freight, which are very important. But remember, we have not even been able to achieve 100% through air. We still have problems with vast life on air freighted flowers. We still have problems with packaging. We still have all these other problems that we encounter by sea. So there's nothing very special about the damages that we cause or the poor packaging that we do to sea freight as compared to air freight. So we talk about improving the supply chain, but also noting that we are still struggling also with the air freight. Of course, there are all those things that we need to do, especially for sea freight, because the losses can be enormous, especially because the transit time is so long. But from where I sit, I think the challenges we face in sea are not very special compared to what we face through the air. Yeah.
Thank you. So coupling now cost, sustainability. Christo, do you see any possibility if we bring Kenya Railway on board for flowers around Rift Valley and Naivasha because they have a facility? How could it help maybe to help us stay sustainable, reduce cost?
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, in terms of sustainability, instead of, trucking 500 or 600 kilometers, 700 from Naivasha even, to Mombasa, or using a railway that's already there, that's going to save you a lot of carbon footprint. About pricing, I don't know right now what they will offer. It's more the technical aspect now of they don't have electrified wagons yet. Government authorities related to the SDR, to the train, say it can easily go without plugging them in, but it's not going to be one of my first containers I'm going to put
the box
on the train
No
right
chance.
now. No, but it's absolutely, that's the end game, I guess.
So eventually we'll need to adapt to that.
Yeah.
Mercy?
Yeah, what I would say is in order to take sea freight to the next level out of Kenya, for example, we need to have more suppliers on board. And that means facilitating the growers to, get the right access to the kind of research they need to make their product work. And also, when we talk about sea freight, you need to have the right investment as a grower to have proper cool chain facilities, for example. I mean, if you say today, I want to do sea freight, there are some basic prerequisites that you need to have in place. So, you can't do sea freight if you do not have a refrigerated truck, for example, or you do not have a cold store that can take your temperatures to the minimum required that is needed for sea freight. So there are certain things that we need to work on before we can scale up on sea freight, is what I would say, yeah.
And I think to add also to what Mercy has said, we also need investment on the other side of the supply chain, because we have we're focusing so much on the grower side, but we also need to make sure that the whole supply chain all the way to the customer is also made efficient, like especially when the containers arrive on the other end. How are they broken? How are the flowers stored? How are they handled? How are they delivered to the end supplier? Yeah. So the whole supply chain has to be looked into so that it can be successful.
Great. Any question?
I think that's where your containers comes into its fore, especially if you're packing into an active CA system. In that, on delivery at destination, if the market's not quite ready for the product, and we're talking about sailing early in containers for Valentine's Day, for instance. If you've arrived there 2 or 3 days too early, you've got the ability that in the containers that you could hold it in that CA environment with little deterioration to the product, and then take delivery and unpack the container immediately, take it to the DC or distribute from the DC. So you do have some added advantages that you have compared to air freight in containers, where it's there at the client's facility plugged in, or the DC plugged in, waiting to unpack, but it's in that environment.
A storage facility.
So it's like being stored in that CA environment. So the minute you take it out, you've got the benefit of being able to distribute. It's a similar benefit the guys like Blueberries would have as well.
well, what Elizabeth, I think, is saying that if you have a consolidated container
Yep.
with multiple customers, or even if you have a full buyer's console, and you, it's 20 pallets, it's 300,000 stems of flowers.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
It takes you a few days to process them.
Yeah.
And that's why you need proper facilities, which now are not in place. I mean, if in Holland you have a cold store somewhere between 4 and 6 degrees, you're very, very lucky. But
Yeah.
you should have one at 1.
At 1 degree. Correct, 100%.
Perfect. Any questions to our panelists?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I've been, on behalf of KFC, I've also been having some discussions with rose growers who some are positive, others are very skeptical. One argument you hear is like, but roses is a premium product. It's like expensive chocolate, you know. So why would you try to make that cheap? Because also at the auction, and that's the discussion what I hear is currently ongoing, sea freight roses get a lower price compared to air freight boxes. So is there also not something you need to do on the image of that? The second question is, if you have a rose stem, which is 25 grams, you know, 200 in a box, that's 5 kgs. Can it really compete price-wise with sea freight? That's my second question.
Yeah, maybe after building our air cargo supply chain up over the last 30, 35 years, sea freight is relatively new. We've done some early work, 2007, 2012, 2014, 2016.
Yep.
It's new. I think we just need to have a proper development agenda. And I think that is also proving what the vast life is, showing off with our customers and building the trust.
Yep.
Well, I think this is also putting up a development agenda. The delays need to be less. The results need to be known, and the costs, I think with all customers and all partners, we're looking at a 30% reduction of price per container, with a pack rate 20% up and packaging costs $1,000 down. I think by that time you get an interesting, worthwhile proposition. If we're not achieving that somewhere the next year, it will be there, but it will be 10%, 12%, like Colombia. Colombia has been working on sea freight for the last 14, 15 years. It has plateaued off at 8 to 12%. If you take out the biggest shipper there, it's a very small percentage. And I think that is for Kenya. We still have this enormous reduction in air cargo capacity. We need this to get those flowers out. But let's build this development agenda for sea freight, and at the same time we need to do the same thing for air freight. We need to have better boxes, better net to gross, better kilos in air cargo, and at the same time in sea freight.
You want to?
Yeah, and I think, Willem, you're giving the example of 200 stems times 25 grams. Rest assured, you reach volumetric in a box and even above. The sea freight box we use now, you can put in 18 kgs, Jeroen, sometimes. And if you and your team work on it, you can put in even more.
Yep.
So that is one. And yes, prices on the auction clock. If you declare it's sea freight, you get 5%, 10% less. So we really need to work on the image. That is what Jeroen is saying. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, clock has a market share of 50% and going down. So the rest is all direct. So that's really a different market, an FOB market.
Okay, actually on the what you say about direct, you know, when I talked with a fellow board member, she asked and she said, but those direct costs are paid for me by the customer anyway. So who's gaining here? You know, is it in the end the freight forwarder? Is it the auction? You know, those are questions asked by the growers in the end,
yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Second, related to that, what Jeroen said the first question, okay, you say we need to consolidate, and a lot of you say, okay, we need to become more professional. Who is now steering that? Is it the private sector who needs to steer it? Is it the KFC who needs to steer it? Is it the government of Kenya? Because we heard also in the morning the government saying sea freight is an important development agenda. Who needs to steer the thing? Because you also said, Jeroen, in your presentation, we've been trying for 10 years to get one size of boxes that can fit on a skid, you know, so that we can save money, and still 10 years later we haven't done it, you know. So those are my two follow-up questions.
Can I have a comment? Because I work in a lot of markets. I've got the benefit of other industries in that. So there needs to be an active industry body that is made up of members of the industry. So sort of like a growers organization. And that growers organization needs to be made up of somebody that represents the freight forwarding, the air freight industry, the shipping industry, independent people that are involved in that, so that it can be an open forum to discuss on how to take the business further and how to take the industry further. Because at the end of the day, there should be no reason why you will never convert everything to containers when it comes to flowers, like we've done the rest of the world, converting other commodities 100% into containers. You will never do it with flowers because of the time frame, and there's markets to hit, Valentine's Day, Christmas, and that type of thing. But there is no reason why the shipping could not be done successfully at sort of a 30-40% level, 50% level potentially in years to come. And the way to do that is with a discussion table around the forum where people put their own personal agendas aside and work towards the industry. And if that can be done successfully with bringing new carton designs that would be more beneficial, and taking technology from other markets and bringing it here with the connection of people that are playing globally, and then the shipping lines will have their accountability to make sure they're on time, reliable, have the right equipment. There would be the inland logistics side that has to be discussed. Maybe rail becomes an option in the future. The cold stores would have to be upgraded so they can go down to 1 degree, and you'd have to have enough reefer trucks to go from end to end, and that can only be done with everybody collaborating. There's not one person that can do that. It has to be a collaboration of an industry body saying we represent the flower growers, and we can't do this on our own because we haven't got the expertise, so we're going to ask a representative from the shipping lines that are involved, a representative from the forwarders that are involved, and there's maybe 10 or 12 people that sit in an organization and make this viable, including the packaging guys as well, to make it a viable solution and keep the costs down. And then there's no reason why there shouldn't be an extra 25% return to the entire chain, but more specifically to the grower, if not more, and making him sustainable for the future. We all know that inflation is going absolutely crazy globally. Inflation, we were talking about it earlier, it's going crazy in Kenya. I can tell you it's going crazy in South Africa and every other country as well. And the only way that we can survive this inflation hurdle is to reduce the costs and make it more sustainable. And to do that, we need volume. So the more that you have volume through the chain, it becomes more sustainable for the entire chain, whether it's the cold store guys, the air freight guys, the forwarding guys, the shipping guys, and then the farmer ultimately as well.
Elizabeth, maybe to answer, who's to champion this?
I think I wanted to say that already work is being done, and it's difficult to put it in a specific office or say these are the people who are going to champion. But the best collaborations I've seen work is when the buyers and the growers work together to make it work. So when you have an interest from the market and a grower who is willing, then there is more concerted effort, and it is likely to move. Because we hear all this skepticism from the industry that the flowers that are sea freighted are of less quality. Unfortunately, like Jeroen and Christo said, we don't have data yet to prove that. But those are the things that we need to work on developing data and perfecting the supply chain so that when we deliver the flower, they're of good quality. But the best collaboration is when we have the players through the value chain, the buyers, the growers, and of course the logistics people, and of course the consultants who help to bring in the knowledge that is required for the sea freight to work.
That has answered your question. Any other questions?
Maybe just to add to that one, we need to make those steps.
Yes.
I think we can question ourselves, what if we haven't taken those steps in the next months? And I think that is sort of, with the current way Kenya's sea freight flowers are packed, we will lose the commitments from the market. And I think that is where, if we seriously want to make a chance, this needs to be sorted. And I think this is where Kuehne Flower Council can play a role, but we still need more expertise and knowledge to come in. But then we need farms to follow up. We have a box designed for sea freight, and the design involves gluing. On the airport, we see 80% is not gluing the box. And I can't, you spend $4 on a box, by the time it leaves the farm gate, it has lost $3 out of the $4 that you sourced it because it's stapled, taped, folded or glued. There's one packaging company that designs a book, there's 3 others copying it. One has made a decent copy, one had poor quality paper so it didn't work, and number 4 had a die cut made with the fold and the cut lines wrong. So you can't put your flowers in that box. It will arrive a disaster. You spend $4 on a box and you incur $10 damage. And I think that is with that behavior, I can, if I need to put my money somewhere, I wish and I hope that this can be successful, but this is urgent. I think the markets are there. I was with a Dutch supermarket last week and they make a statement on what they expect from Sea Freight. It's fantastic what they want to achieve. But now we need to pull up a
What timelines are we giving ourselves? We are all here, we're all panelists, let's challenge ourselves.
I gave Parit 2 weeks for his new books to be launched.
Yeah, I think that's the crucial. I'm hearing that the box we need a better design box, and that's the crucial starting point. The second starting point would be, well, at the same time as the crucially designed box, we want the same box, the flowers to be put into that box in the right temperature chain. So as we said, anything that's destined for sea freight must be in a reefer truck from the farm, and that reefer truck must be able to supply 1 degree temperature. So I think that's super important that happens, and then you've already taken out probably 70% of your risk with regards to sea freight. Once you've got your first mile sorted, you've got your carton sorted out.
Yeah.
Then the shipping line needs to come to the party to make sure that we deliver the box as we promised on time in Rotterdam within the arrival times that we've estimated. So I think that's crucial because that's your last 30% risk. Which I think we've done enough steps in place now to make sure that that's with the weekly service schedule and the dedicated berthing windows. I think that's put a lot of that to bed now, other than forces of nature. So, and that's in anything. Airline industry, you also got force of nature. So I think cartons, first mile, and then shipping lines must worry about the ocean leg to deliver what we've promised.
Any further questions?
2 weeks for the cartons. What do we say? Two weeks.
No, that's the commitment we give.
It depends if that was a discussion outside in the tent or downstairs in the car park. Depends on how well it went.
No, we have our Valentine sales coming, and a lot of our market will put in their own good money to achieve good results over Valentine. Sure. And they're ready for it. There's a fantastic buy-in. All we need to do is deliver results. And I think that is where we are. And if we do well, there's another opportunity coming for Mother's Day. And if we, 2021, we missed Valentine because a ship was stuck on the ocean. Yes. I think, hey, that's we can't have that one again. Last year it was Mother's Day. So let's say there's a whole lot of stuff that needs to start ticking.
Absolutely. But I think that's also communication, eh?
Yeah.
Because communication has to be passed down the chain of which vessel you're aiming for, and that must be passed down through Daniel to myself. So we can manage and make sure that the pressure is put on the right people. That these voyages, listen, don't go into putting a vessel in dry dock in that voyage or anything silly. We have to make sure that we all communicate clearly that voyage is priority. And we do it all the time for other markets when there's a Chinese New Year and a duty deadlines in Europe and other things that come. So it's not that we're not used to this. We just need to be informed well in advance.
The Chileans are exporting cherries to China for the Chinese New Year, and they have the Cherry Express. They charter a few ships from Chile to China just in time for the New Year. Can we get anything like a Valentine's Express, the Mother's Day Express?
I think if we deliver on time, you don't have to worry about that. They're probably doing it because they can't guarantee a delivery.
It's a seasonal thing.
For Valentine, we're talking about the boxes have to be loaded within 2 weeks from today, right? To make it.
That's when we start. Well, let's say over Christmas it will be busy.
Any question? Since we have some few minutes, do flowers from Kenya compete with South America, Colombia, Ecuador?
It's a different assortment. I think it goes into different markets. Ecuadorians is long lengths, big heads, ends up at high-end florist shops, weddings, stuff like that. The Kenyan assortment is different from that. Some do compete, especially from high altitude farms. But I think it's very hard to compare one to one. Even Ethiopia and Kenya, it's hard to compare them one on one.
But you're looking at the type of product. But now can we compete on the US market?
Yes.
The US market is
Correct.
logistic-wise really difficult. The capacity is not there, the pricing is not good. Can you engineer a route 25 days into Miami?
There's a huge need for let's say cheaper roses from Kenya in the US.
In the US market.
There's a really good market.
But can we now compete, Mr. John McDonald?
I'd have to come back to you on that day. You put me on the spot. Miami, it has to be Miami.
Miami is the place.
But there's a very interesting discussion going on, and you've mentioned the supermarkets in Netherlands, that they've made a stance probably to stop using air for vegetables.
Well, there's been something happening the last 6-7 weeks in the Netherlands. The leading Dutch opinion maker he's on television every night, and his birthday, and his team comes up with flowers. And he says, flowers, are you crazy? This is not sustainable. Mm-hmm. You've just bought an electric Tesla to reduce your carbon footprint. One bunch of flower will undo 150 kilometers. And it's been, now that, I thought he was a comedian, but then someone else says he's the opinion maker. That comment is now coming back through Dutch society. Every 2, 3, 4 days you see someone. My sister-in-law is a big banker. In the Zuidas in Amsterdam, meeting like today. Reggie, next year we have flowers here as a present for the speakers. But at that event on the Zuidas in Amsterdam, they said, okay, we stop giving flowers because it's not sustainable. And then the 1,500 MBO students in Amsterdam graduating. Normally we give you flowers, but we've just learned it's not sustainable. So this year, bar of chocolate. Then last year, one of the political parties in the Netherlands, with about 4-5% of the votes, they said we should really put on our agenda that we stop doing flowers and a whole line of other products, meat, fish. Let's quit. But there is momentum building up, as in, are flowers sustainable? Fortunate enough on the Kenyan side, he says the footprint of one Dutch rose is 11 times higher than the footprint of one Kenyan rose. So that data is out there. I think we can, with air freight, we can make it 20 times better. With sea freight, we can even have it way better. Well, I think that is something to be aware of. It's in our own native flower country, Netherlands. Yeah. There is momentum building up, as in discussing, are flowers sustainable? We have homework to do. Get results, share the good news.
Great. Communication, collaboration, and commitment. So maybe to wrap it up.
And accountability.
And accountability, of course. To wrap it up, Mercy?
Yeah, maybe what I can say is sea freight has a lot of potential. We just need to take the next steps to unlock the potential. And I'm happy to hear that, like with CMA CGM, you are now adding an additional vessel to make a weekly sailing. So I think 2 vessels, even better. So that's a good step in the right direction. And I think next time when we meet here, we will be talking a different story.
Definitely.
Yeah.
John?
Yeah, I think that the will of everybody is there to make it work. I think there's maybe a little bit still needed on the technology side for people to make it work, but I think the opportunity is there, the window is there, and COVID has taught us that you can't rely on one supply chain in any market for anything, including car manufacturing. So I think the industry owes it to itself to find a viable alternative, and I think sea freight is providing that, and it's just a case of onboarding process and building trust.
Great. Christo?
Yeah, I think my advice would be to the growers and to the buyers to just start and learn and experience and improve. And you can start with just one pallet, really small risk, and go from there. And think it through thoroughly before you start, but then just start with small volume and grow into Flowers by Sea.
Great, just start. Elizabeth?
My concluding remarks would be that we need to get down to start ticking the boxes that Jeroen talked about, from the growers all the way to the market, and Sea Freight will become successful. It's going to be our success story.
Good to hear that.
I can see success coming, but there is a serious amount of work to be done, and it's not a quick, easy fix. And maybe, as in many speakers have been showing off their mastering of Swahili, haraka haraka nima baraka.
Thank you.